Laipni lūdzam, Zviedrijas vēstniecībā, and a warm welcome to this presentation of the Business Climate Survey in the Baltic States 20. Ta-da! This is a recurring event, or a recurring, shouldn't say event, but the survey is a recurring phenomenon, usually done every 3 years. Hence, the last time was in 2018. And we thought, we gave it some thinking, and we figured that 18 months into the pandemic that has caused so much pain and suffering to all of us and many of the businesses in our countries, that now would be a good time to once again undertake a survey and to learn how the pandemic has changed, or perhaps not changed, the perceived business climate in the Baltic states, according to Swedish companies present here. And the survey is a joint project with our sister embassies in Tallinn and Vilnius, and it's supported by Swedbank, Telia, and law firm Glimstedt. And before I go on, I really want to give them an applause. That's a huge thank you from all of us. In the previous survey, two of the challenges expressed by Swedish companies in Latvia were the perceived constant changes regarding tax policies, a very familiar subject to Swedes, as well as a lack of long-term and predictable rules of the game for businesses. So now we wonder, has the pandemic brought another set of issues to the forefront? What do Swedish companies think about the future in the Baltics? Which areas are of concern? And I believe the assumption is, at least my assumption is, that the pandemic has and will force businesses to not only act, but also to rethink to ensure their competitiveness. About this and much more, we're soon to find out. The survey will be presented by Mr. Janar Sutt, business partner at the Baltic Consulting Team based in Estonia. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Sutt. And after the presentations, there will be a panel discussion with 3 eminent experts from the Latvian Investment and Development Agency, LIAA, the Foreign Investors Council in Latvia, FISIL, as well as the Investment and Tourism Agency in Riga. They will discuss, I assume, how the results of the survey can be interpreted and how to best address or remedy the concerns cited in the survey. And of course, the survey will be moderated by Zane. And Zane Čulkstēna. Zane is not only a managing partner of the strategic, you have the longest name, HR and? Sounds fab. And I buy that. But in addition, you're an alumni of our sort of family member, the Stockholm School of Economics in Riga, of course. Mr. Sutt, over to you. I leave the floor and the audience to you to take us, or rather sweep us away. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janar Sutt, and I'm from the Baltic Consulting Team, and really excited to be being here. Business Climate Survey Baltic States 2021. First, I will give you an overview of the methodology. Data gathering was done in May this year, and analysis carried out in June and July. All in all, we approached approximately 570 companies, Swedish-owned companies in the Baltic states, and we received 128 answers from the Swedish-owned companies here in the Baltic states. Companies which have local presence, companies which have operations here. Regarding the methodology, we followed the same methodology as during the previous surveys, meaning that we only approached the Swedish-owned companies and the Swedish or other non-local managers. So we didn't approach local managers for Swedish companies, but only foreign managers. And in order to make it more relevant to the pandemic era, then we also adjusted and added some few questions about the pandemic to see how the pandemic has affected the business climate. So, regarding the results then, business climate in the Baltic states is good, and more than half of the companies in Lithuania and Estonia found it good or very good. So companies in Latvia and Lithuania were more on a neutral opinion. So next slide, please. But however, business climate in the Baltic states has not improved compared to the last survey conducted 3 years ago. So what could be the reason for that? Especially when we look at Latvia, then the drop has been from 70, the positive opinion has dropped from 74 percentage points down to 39 percentage points. And of course, we believe that it is mainly due to the pandemic, because the contacts between the mother company in Sweden and subsidiaries in the Baltic states, the contacts might have become slightly less intensive and only electronic, since there were a number of travel restrictions. And in other words, the contact with the market has sort of slowed down a bit, and that we believe might be one of the reasons why from the Swedish perspective the business climate has not improved. How has the pandemic affected the businesses? Then we can see that Swedish companies did well despite the pandemic, and Swedish-owned companies in Lithuania, they could even, however, increase their turnover. But generally, Swedish companies they saw a decline in the turnovers, but at the same time, the companies were also very eager, and they managed to make their operations more efficient, as they still showed very good positive results in the for the 2020 business year. When we look at the turnover expectations, what will happen within the coming 12 months, then we can also see that companies in general are optimistic about their operations in the Baltic states. And they believe that they will increase their turnover. The turnover will grow within the coming 12 months, and specifically optimistic here in Latvia, where 74% of the respondents answered that turnover will increase slightly or significantly in the coming 12 months. When we look at the investments, then companies are also optimistic when it comes to planned investments. They are continuing their investments in the Baltic states. What we also saw from the results is that there is a shift in focus to value chain and markets closer to Sweden, meaning that that companies, when earlier it was just mainly a talk about bringing their production and operations closer to the market in Sweden, then now in the light of pandemic, we can really see that companies have started to act like that. And they believe that the focus will be more in the closer regions and closer markets to Sweden, which we in the Baltic states are, and also the support. We also have a support when it comes to logistics. So it's a very good geographical location, and all the infrastructure also supports this trend. When talking about Swedish brand, then historically it has been very important to have a Swedish brand which supported Swedish companies and their business and operations in the Baltic states. And the importance of the Swedish brand was especially important in Lithuania, where more than 50% of the companies said that this is essential for their business, but also in the other Baltic states. Physical infrastructure has improved, and today fills the expectations of the Swedish companies here in the Baltic states. And when we look at the results from the previous time, 2018, then we can clearly see that the infrastructure has improved quite nicely, according to the Swedish investors and businesses who are operating here. When looking at the market needs and market conditions, then apart from sustainability aspects, most of the expectations of the Swedish companies in the Baltic states are fulfilled. The only thing which, or when talking about Estonia, then Estonia scores highest when it comes to digitalization. Lithuanian work culture and business mindset is very much appreciated by the Swedish companies. And in Latvia, the optimism is very much appreciated. The only thing which might need some further attention for the future is work with license and permits approvals. That is something which, according to the Swedish companies, this is still a challenge, and sometimes, according to them, it takes too much time or it's not clear enough. But that is mainly the only thing which Swedish companies are not that satisfied with. If we look at the other market needs, then we can also see that the Baltic states, from a Swedish company perspective, are rather similar. There are no major changes, but somehow Latvia, as it is also geographically in the middle, it's also sort of in some aspects it's also in the middle from the Swedish perspective, how the companies perceive the business culture here. As we know, what is also important to mention is that, as we all know, there are some challenges with recruitments. It's always a challenge to find good employees and do good recruitments. But what we can see is that in the Baltics, access to the key personnel is more difficult than finding a collaboration partner. So instead of hiring someone, you could instead establish a collaboration with an existing company which you could collaborate with. Cost efficiency, of course, is the key on the Baltic market for the Swedish companies, and especially important for Latvia, Lithuania, slightly less important for Estonia. But what we can also see from this slide is that seems like Latvian companies are more orientated on softer values and softer issues, like everything related to employees, for example. It is important for them to develop and train their staff. So they seem to pay more attention to the conditions of workplace and CSR related topics. And corruption. Corruption, unfortunately, still exists according to the Swedish companies. Not as big challenge as in Lithuania, but still this is something which companies have faced now and then, yeah, this is something to pay attention to and to work with. Also, when it comes to environmental and social issues, then we saw that they don't have very big effect on purchasing decisions. Meaning that, for example, if a company decides to buy something or they would like to procure something, then the environmental or social issues, they are not yet that important. It is not yet part of the purchasing procedure to include these issues into the purchasing process. And also, companies said that suppliers' work with sustainability practices is not yet that important. So it's not yet that much appreciated, or people don't pay that much attention to it. But on the other hand, even though the awareness about sustainability in the Baltic states seemed to be rather limited, then almost half of the companies in the Baltic states still believe that they are optimistic and believe that there is potential in green public investment. But as said, sustainability is not yet a priority for the Baltic companies. So, to summarize Latvia then, according to the Swedish companies, Latvia has very good geographical position, situated in the middle of the Baltics, with good location, good logistics. Also, ability to adapt. Companies did economically well, and during the pandemic situation, and they are also optimistic about the future. And of course, they find that the Swedish brand supports the local business. And when it comes to green public procurements and the European Green Deal, then the companies also see a very good opportunity within that area. Regarding the challenges, then seems like the business climate in Latvia, according to the Swedish companies, is not as good as neighbors in the north and neighbors in the south, as it has dropped the most. And also, companies wish to have some sort of better permits and approval procedures that would correspond slightly better to their expectations. And of course, something which is common for all three Baltic states is the rather low awareness of sustainability practices. And this is something I believe where Swedish companies could take maybe a more active role, and to promote this, that sustainability and CSR, it's not only a cost, but it is something which can make them more efficient, and which can give them a good start. And then some few summarizing sentences. As mentioned, Swedish companies generally find the business climate in the Baltic states good. Sweden has a strong brand which supports the local businesses. And Swedish companies in the Baltic states, they are rather fast to adapt to new circumstances. Companies have strong market confidence, and infrastructure, it supports the growth and success of Swedish-owned companies. And market conditions, then apart from sustainability aspects, they in general meet the expectations, and companies are pleased with the business practices, and sustainability needs more attention. And some recommendations which we have received from the Swedish respondents is to pay more attention to sustainability challenges, and to present the best practices, and to improve the general awareness of sustainability. So that, I would say, is briefly about the results from this year's business climate survey. And I would be very happy to have your questions and to initiate a discussion on those topics. Thank you so much.
So yes, let's start. And I actually have an intro question to to every one of you, and it's two questions. So I want you, every one of you, to answer the question first, generally informative. So how big part of Swedish investors, Swedish companies is part of what you do? So basically, how many of them are in Latvia? How many of them are part of Foreign Investors Council, roughly, so that we understand? And then how many of them are part of Riga, so foreign investment companies? And then the second question I want you to answer straight away is, as an intro, what did you find most positive as a takeaway from the survey, and what is something that worries you? So just two aspects, and then we're going to go on from there. So Lāsma, let's start with state.
Yeah, good morning, Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be today here. Very briefly about Swedish investments in Latvia. So first of all, I need to say that Sweden is #1 investor in Latvia. So thank you very much for that. So from all investments in Latvia, it accounts 16.6%. So it's a significant number. And in this first half of 2021, it amounted 2.9 billion euros. So that's a significant amount of resources, let's say like that. Also, please note that this foreign direct investment in total makes in Latvia 590 companies. So small note to the survey where only 37 participated. So please note that there is 590 companies in Latvia with Swedish capital. So that's also a significant number. Another things, Swedish, of course, the main investments are in finance intermediary, but of course it's also trade, real estate, and manufacturing. From LIAA point of view, of course, we are very interested in this manufacturing and service part. From the survey, I was very glad to find out that the companies are willing to invest more, so that's a very good sign, and that's where we want to go further on, not only from the government agency point of view, but also from the Latvia. We want that our existing investors in Latvia are satisfied with the business here, so they develop their businesses further on. What made me a little bit cautious is decrease of the opinion about the business environment in general. But I would say probably my opinion about that is that COVID actually probably made some impact on that, and let's see and hope that the next survey might be better than this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Lāsma.
Good morning, everyone. I think I won't be too original, probably will repeat what Lāsma said, but first of all, regarding Swedish companies in FISL, we have quite a few as well, and obviously the Swedish Chamber of Commerce is very active in FISL as well. Just quickly running through the members in various work groups that cover different sectors, I think there's at least a couple of Swedish companies in each one. So you're very well represented in different sectors that also cover various recommendations to the government. But regarding the survey, I was kind of thinking about this when the numbers came up regarding the change in investment climate attractiveness. But COVID also happened in Estonia and Lithuania. So, I mean, the pandemic hit basically all countries around the world. So I think it's more how the country responded to the pandemic rather than the fact of the pandemic itself. So I think there's more of a discussion on what the state did and also obviously what the private sector did rather than just the fact of the pandemic. But that obviously that number is not does not kind of give a lot of sort of positive feedback. However, as the presenter mentioned, there's quite a lot of optimism in Latvia. You could see that in Lithuania and Estonia, they had more concrete positive outcomes from the survey, and in Latvia it's optimism, which kind of seems a bit sad, to be honest, because you would expect that there would be at least something concrete that has improved in the last 3 years. But I think it's great to see that companies in Latvia are more invested in the development of human capital. But I think maybe during the discussion we're also going to land on why that is, and maybe the reasons behind it are not so positive, but the fact that companies are focusing on human capital, I think, is a positive takeaway in general.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yeah, I mean, everything was already mentioned by the colleagues, and Sweden indeed is the #1 contributor when it comes to foreign direct investment inflowing the Riga and Latvia for that matter. Sweden also, I think, is a very good fit culture-wise when it comes to, you know, there's not a lot of differences between the Latvian culture and the Swedish culture. As I like to say that, I think that Latvia out of the Baltics is the Sweden of the Baltics, and Lithuania is the Italy of the Baltics, because there's a huge contrast between the two countries, but when it comes to Sweden and Latvia and the comparisons in between the two, I think we're very close in that matter. What was very shocking to me was the very drastic drop in the perception of the investment climate. I am not sure if I can, directly agree to that, because if anything, I think that it has gotten a little bit better, but you know, it's not up to me to decide. But yeah, I understand there are still a lot of factors and a lot of things that need to be fixed and changed. That's why there's a part of the reason this investment and tourism agency of Riga was established to serve as an additional intermediary between the businesses and the associations and chambers. And also I had the pleasure to meet the Swedish Chamber of Commerce. We welcomed them in the City Council just last week. Had a very fruitful conversation to understand what are the issues, the challenges that they're tackling, and we're going to be the ones who'll help to face these issues together, help to tackle them, help to fix the bottlenecks in the public procedures, and we'll see where we can go from there.
Excellent. Actually, all three of you touch upon my first question, is as for the reason in the decline, rather drastic, I have this one, hopefully that works, decline in the business climate. So I agree to Lynn, meaning COVID has affected all three Baltic states pretty similarly, you know. Estonia and Lithuania was faster at reacting and probably a bit more effective, judging by vaccination rates. But as representatives of really Latvia and Riga, do you see, is there anything else we should have done different or going on further should improve? Because actually 39 is really low. Even in 2015 we had, what, 69. So it has decreased almost half and have gone down to yeah, much lower than 2015. So the question, can you think of other reasons what we've done wrong, or A, and B, what should be done going on further so that next time we have much different rates? And we'll go more in details on separate topics on licenses, permits, corruption, human capital, but then in general. Roland, as you have, Mike.
Sure. Well, from my perspective, as you mentioned, all three Baltic countries tackled the COVID issue slightly differently. And I think our approach, the Latvian approach, was to over-restrict and over-limit the businesses. Whereas Lithuania tried to, and Estonia for that matter as well, tried to open the full functioning of businesses for the longest period possible. And that was really the biggest difference. Even though the turnout seems to be good, and as we saw, also the Swedish companies reported that the turnover is most likely to grow this year and for the next years, and they're also looking to invest more in the upcoming years. What's the most devastating thing probably for businesses is that there were a lot of restrictions. It was changing rapidly. It was unclear at times, and how we all know, for people and companies alike, nobody likes unclarity. So where if the issue is clear and you know what you have to tackle, then it's fine. If it's unclear and if it's changing all the time and there are new restrictions and it's changed and you don't really know when you can get vaccines and how it's going to happen, nobody likes that. I think that's a very important part of the reason why we dropped so drastically. But obviously, COVID is not the only factor. But I guess we'll talk about the other factors.
And going on further, this year, let's say.
I mean, everything that we can only change is in the approach. And if our approach is health first and the individuals first, as opposed to companies first, that's the only thing that can be changed. I mean, because if you put the company first and allow them to function for as long as possible without drastically limiting and pushing them to adapt as quickly as possible, then obviously they will be, less reluctant to think that they are pushed around too much by the public sector. I think that's also a part of the reason, because the public sector is very demanding and they were restricting specific things that businesses can and cannot do.
Okay, Lāsma?
Maybe from the government point of view, I wouldn't say that we are doing so bad at the moment. Actually, if we look at the first half of this year, the economy is really growing. I will stress out really, because the last year GDP was negative, minus 3.6. It's already growing much higher, and the very conservative forecast for this year is plus 3.6. So. And for the next year, it's 6%. So it's very conservative. Let's stress that word. Also, if we look at the compared to the last year, export is growing as well. It's in total, it's plus export of goods and services is plus 15% this first half of the year. Export of goods is plus 20%. That's the newest statistics. We also need to remember that COVID hit the different industries very definitely. So I'm sorry, I really don't know the profile of the companies from Latvia which were interviewed in this survey. So that might affect the general responses as well. Because if you look to the different companies, of course, as you may know that hospitality tourism is suffering. But in the same time, manufacturing is actually thriving, and they are doing quite well. I'm not saying everyone, but in general. From that point of view, also we need to remember that yes, I agree on the restrictions on COVID side, and government made some mistakes. I will not go there. I'm not competent on that. But in terms of support for companies, the government has allocated 3.2 billion euros this year, and there is also plans to even extend this money for different support mechanisms. So we need to remember that as well. And for the future, there is even intent to even increase that. What I have heard from Ministry of Economics that this year, hopefully, they will not make mistakes at closing businesses, but even in the worst case, the intention is to keep businesses open. So let's hope that they will not change this course later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lāsma, for a positive light as well. Speaking about how to improve it in the next years and how to have more Swedish investments in Latvia, Lāsma pointed out very nicely that what makes you glad is to see that 50+% of companies here plan to increase their investment here. And we know there's a general rule 80-20, so 80% of business oftentimes comes from 20% of clients, and oftentimes they're here already. So my question still, I'll ask still to kind of representatives, to Lāsma and to Rolands, is what are you actually doing, or what are the plans for the nearest future to increase, the investments from everyone who sits here? So how do you work with existing investors?
Yeah, that's maybe on a general daily basis. Linda is more competent
Linda also,
to speak about talking with existing investors. But yes, actually, that's the main message I want to convey, is that we have a project with Swedish capital, and they are existing investors from Sweden and Latvia, or existing companies who are planning to develop their businesses and invest more. So that's the main message. Our projects from Sweden are basically the ones who are existing investors and who want to develop their business further on. Of how we work them, of course, it's different by talking with them as well. In some sense, maybe we need to improve and do it even more. That's for sure. But as you know, we are also a little bit with capacity problems in our agency as well as a government. But we will be solving that soon. But I missed.
No, I think you answered. So. Yes, you're working on that.
Yes,
so,
yes, we are trying.
Linda, how does that work look from your side?
Just to finish, you know, every year we have so-called success stories, or the companies who make a decision to invest in Latvia, and there are every year projects from Sweden, at least 3 to 5, so that's a good sign as well.
Linda, how does it look from your perspective, representing these companies also?
I would say, I think the survey also outlined one of the recommendations was increasing decision-making transparency, which I think we've kind of glossed over because this is one of the issues that investors have really been tackling with during COVID, because certain legislation just goes through that has nothing even to do with the pandemic, just goes through really quickly, that investors are then surprised to find out what kind of decisions have been made, how it affects their companies or their sectors, and they haven't been consulted. Or I think there are a few things that are, I think, very simple that can be done to improve investors' trust in Latvia as a country to invest in, that have not really been taken into account as much. For example, if we look at involving social partners and investors who are going to be directly affected by certain legislation change, just send them the document 2 weeks prior, not 2 days prior, asking to comment at the last minute and asking their opinion at the very last minute, where most companies are very busy, most people are very busy. So it's not realistic to get high quality feedback on certain planned changes in a very short period of time. So what we've seen during the pandemic, investors see more changes like that happening. Just to comment, I don't want to be too negative, but that is my job, sort of representing investors. The way that we improve the investment environment is by asking what issues investors see and then actually proposing solutions to those challenges and to those issues. So it might seem sometimes that we're coming from a very negative place, but I think it's more investors' experience in Latvia, and the end goal is the same for, I think, everyone sitting here. We want to improve the investment climate, and that's nobody's challenging that end goal. I can't say that there have been a few quite big reforms that have gone through in the last few years under Karin's government. Also, some reforms have been moving forward during COVID, which is a positive sign. I think we all remember that in the very beginning, most things just stopped, and all of the attention of all ministries and all of the public sector was turned on COVID, which is understandable. Also, FISL tried to be a very understanding partner. We come from a very rational dialogue, so we need to understand where government's decisions are coming from. But we also, once we can't even explain it with logical facts, then we also start looking at, well, okay, what's the next step? How are we gonna pick up and increase investment further, and what are the opportunities coming out of a pandemic that existing investors can increase investment, better the investment environment, and then attract new investment? I think we also had the same question to Mr. Roškans during the latest High Council meeting last week. FISL investors also asked, what is the type of work being carried out with existing investors by LIAA, not just attracting new investors, but also increasing existing investment? Because at the first half of the pandemic, it was sort of said by investors, it's easier to grow existing investment during a crisis than it is to attract completely new investment. So what was the partnership formed with existing investors? I think maybe some investors got their answer, some didn't, but as Lāsma said, it depends on the sector also, how different sectors are affected. It very much depends on the company and on their field of operations. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, you did. And Lāsma, I think Lāsma raised a quick, as a comment. Yes?
Yeah, just the practical things what we are working on from the Investment Development Agency of Latvia is that we are in the period of different change of different EU funding programs, and but the good news from probably existing investors and new investors that there will be so-called a couple of programs for support of the new and existing investors. One of them will be, let's say, how to tell it more correctly? It's more. It will be a support program which will give a loan, which can be turned as a grant if the project will be in priority sectors. It will make a certain amount. It will create a certain amount of jobs. It will be in priority sector of Latvia, and it will invest a significant amount of money. There will be support program coordinated from LIAA together with Altum. So this program might be at the beginning of the next year. So I cannot share the details, a lot of details at the moment, but just a big picture. Also, another new program will be for support of training for employees, also in different ways, but that's also will come next year. So there are, and of course, all the other support which comes from new RRF and other EU funds. So there is a good news. There will be support, also, how to say, additional support with the new programs coming on. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody heard that. Yes, there's money coming. Rolands, how's Riga working?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of our priorities, and really the key here to foster the growth and development of the existing investors, I think, is for sure and maintaining an open dialogue. And this is one thing that we're focusing on. And of course, it's not easy to maintain an open dialogue with every separate company. Therefore, we're right now going rounds with meetings with chambers, associations, organizations, and also some separate companies, just to hear them out, just to understand what are the problem situations, what are the bottlenecks, how can we help, what are the common interests, how we can contribute to each other's efforts and foster better outcomes for everybody involved. So this is really the key. And for us as a public agency, it is very important to be available at all times, to be agile, to be quick, to be responsive, and to be also proactive from our side. Because we cannot only sit and wait until the investor association or chamber, whoever is going to come to us with a problem. We need to be proactive. We need to predict that there might be problems arising. We need to identify the challenges that multiple chambers and multiple companies are mentioning in the meetings, and then we figure out which are the main ones that we need to focus on. And really, there is just a handful of the challenges that everybody is facing. So we already know what are the main challenges. It just so happens that those are also some of the hardest challenges to fix, and it's a very in-depth decision-making process, and it's going to take years for us to fix. For example, the education system, the migration policies, because these are some of the issues that come up the most often. But if we look back, just recently we had issues with the construction policies, and nobody knew, and it was rather not transparent. People and the construction companies couldn't understand what are the deadlines, what are the dates, when is this going to be fixed, when is that going to be approved, when they're going to get the permit. But with the introduction of Green Corridor, a lot of the problems have been fixed. And there are two different green corridors. One's for LIAA, one is for the construction board in the city. But really, since the introduction of construction board and the change of management in the construction board, we have been receiving less and less complaints. And we're also, like, talking about the Agency of Investment and Tourism in Riga, we're the sort of a bulldog in the city council structures. the little annoying dog, which has a power and teeth that can bark as well if necessary, and it really pisses all the other structures of the city council off when we are demanding for them to do something about the existing situation or a bottleneck that some of the chambers or companies have pointed out. But this is a goal for us, to really be the intermediary, to be the single point of contact for any external party, for us to manage their interests internally within the city council structures. Because for them individually it's difficult to do, but for us internally it's much easier to do so. This is a very crucial factor that we are focusing on.
Mm-hmm. Then I have a follow-up question for Roland, to you particularly. So I've worked with global business services quite a lot, and if we compare Vilnius with Riga, Riga is like a non-existent, basically, well, when it comes to activity and number of new investments attracted. And most of the new team is the same that was under the old team in Riga. There was a memorandum signed about huge plans of attracting. None of that has come true. How is this going to be now different? What are the KPIs for Riga when it comes to attracting both GBS and other companies? So how many companies do Riga plan to attract and service, let's say, by the end of this year and next year? Because I see a lot of talks in the form of process, but so far we have not seen much of results if you compare Riga with Vilnius.
Well, it's a slightly pessimistic approach on the realization of the KPIs of memorandum, because a good part of it is actually realized, and also just recently we received 2 very high-profile GBSs to our market, which is Swisscom and Norwegian Air, both with the very high expansion plans for the upcoming years. 300 highly qualified IT professionals for Swisscom in the next upcoming years, and for Norwegian Air they're planning to have 800 employees, which is a lot. And also some of the existing GBSs are crucially expanding. We know that CCC has found another big international partner, and they will expand to additional stories in an office. And for the longest time, what the issue that we had was the lack of available office space, which is now being fixed, because we're expecting additional 300,000 A-class offices within the 2-3 next years. And there's a lot of offices being built in Glimstedt, 3 buildings, in the center 2 buildings, in the opposing side of the River Daugava, also multiple buildings. So we expect a lot of high class office spaces, because you talk about attracting companies, but how can we attract companies if there's not even a single office space A-class where you can place 200, 300 employees at a time? So it wasn't even possible. Right now, even Swisscom was, considering whether they should stay in Z Towers or move to another company. But I mean, where can they move? There's nowhere to move, so that was an issue. But yeah, I mean, we have specific numbers, specific targets that we want to achieve, and it's going to be available also publicly. It's going to be our medium-term strategy, and we plan to both to foster expansion of existing companies and also to attracting new ones. And GBS is indeed still one of our priority sectors. And already, even though the agency was established 5 months ago, and we just went through the building and recruiting and all the setting up phase, we already have multiple investment projects in the pipeline. And what's more important, we're not going to work alone, nor we're going to compete with LIAA. Instead, we're going to sign a memorandum of cooperation and a more extensive cooperation agreement where we'll figure out what's the best way to cooperate, how do we go to as many conferences and forums, how do we utilize our resources the best so that we wouldn't pay for one and the same thing. So yeah, we're thinking
lots
strategically. Yeah, okay. I mean, lots in the pipeline, lots to expect, and I'm going to be directly responsible for if we're not succeeding. So
I'm gonna Get back to
talk
that
about
in a
it
year.
in 3 years.
Great. You mentioned lack of available office space. I know that by far much bigger challenge is lack of skilled labor. And this appeared in 2 slides here. This was the factor evaluated the lowest for Latvia. A, B, I would like to, I would challenge the interpretation of researchers as for Latvia being oriented more to softer issues. Many having worked with that topic, the reason why companies invest a bit more or look at training their staff is because there's lack of skills. Because the skills gap is much bigger in respect to digital skills, in respect to English language skills, and others are much bigger than in Lithuania and Estonia. So that's not a choice. It's a necessity, really. So speaking of this topic, but that's it's not a critique. I'm just saying that my interpretation would definitely differ, and we see it in many surveys of entrepreneurs and companies in Latvia that access to skilled labor is a problem. So Linda, can you comment briefly on that, and then the question both to LIAA and Riga. What are you doing to fix that? I know what LIAA is doing, and Lāsma mentioned the programs that will be available from next year.
I think the human capital issue has been on the forefront of investors' minds for however many years they've been here. I think this has always been one of the top issues. From FISL's perspective, we've always talked about availability of labor. Mm-hmm. So this also includes not just skills-wise, but also that includes immigration policy, mm-hmm. That includes seasonal workforce, and another aspect that we touched upon was the recent higher education reform. Mm-hmm. That was also thought through in FISL work groups, discussed with investors, and that was also sort of started and carried through, because I think we were very persistent in the fact that investors require more competent people coming out from universities, because otherwise the sentiment we heard was, well, we see someone with a degree, but we have to train them from zero, because there's just the skills that they have learned do not really go together with the investment environment needs. Currently, I think the conversation has turned towards more of a discussion regarding skills and requalification of existing employees. I think everyone's heard maybe many times the World Economic Forum evaluation that in the next 5 years, 50% of workforce will have to requalify and gain new skills. So our biggest question is, well, what's the plan of Latvia to do that? Because we have a very limited workforce, so we need our people to be more effective, and especially if we want to attract new investment. And obviously companies are doing a lot already themselves, but it's not, and companies cannot do everything. There also has to be state involvement in this aspect. And if we look at the Latvian labor code, it also doesn't protect investments that companies make into their employees. So there's very little protection if you, for example, retrain your employee. There's very little protection of that investment that you have put into that person, because they can turn around and go somewhere else. If we do have a very competitive labor market in terms of if you're an employee, not an employer, you can obviously choose other companies to work for. And this is something that we've seen quite a lot, that investors tell us that they invest, that person gains new skills, and then they obviously can leverage those skills to get a job at somewhere else. And this is very competitive between various companies, both with foreign and local capital. So the biggest question here is, first of all, investors are willing to actually improve the skills of their own employees. Obviously, the survey also showed that. Then their question is, well, how are they gonna? How is their investment protected? And what is the state doing from its side, from state employment agency or from via the what's the abbreviation in English?
State education and development.
Yeah, basically the agency that's responsible for adult education. What is their plan, and how are they actually reskilling employees to fit the market needs? Not just push through we've all heard these goals of 163,000 or however many thousand people are going to be reskilled in the next 5 or 6 years. But then our question is, to what? Because that's what investors are interested in, not just a number of people being reskilled, because you can reskill them in skills that are not going to be of value to certain companies. But you can also reskill them in a way that they will be very agile, and they will be able to then actually themselves kind of fit into the labor market and keep developing their skills, so that they don't have to then be sort of reskilled by the state every few years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were raising.
To both, yes.
Yeah, just to sort of reflect what Linda just said. I mean, I've also heard this argument from investors, and to me it's kind of silly, because if you say that, I'm going to invest in this employee and he's going to leave me, I mean, where's the problem? The problem's in the company. So why is you invest in the individual, you train him to be good, and if he or she decides to leave, I mean, there's something with the company, not with the individual. I mean, if you put it this way, I mean, no, but really, I mean, there are two ways of. Imagine CEO asking an HR person, and this is an actual meme. CEO asks to an HR person, but what happens if we invest in the person and the person leaves? And the HR person has a reverse question to the CEO, and he asks, but imagine what happens if you don't invest in the person and the person stays. So you have an untrained employee that will stay for 5 years and be practically useless. So it's up to you if you want to invest in your employees, and it's up to you as a company owner to ensure the kind of environment where employees would like to stay in and thrive in. It's not up to the public sector to ensure that the employees stay in your company. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, one could debate that, because these investments are sometimes very, very high. So Linda, shortly, and then I'll have follow-up question to Rolands, and then we'll go to Lāsma.
I think that quote was from like Bill Gates or something, and I think that's all nice and well to think in that kind of aspects. But the main issue is there's lack of labor force in Latvia. And you can have people who have, let's say, high-level digital skills. They're working in you put two Swedish companies side by side, and one of them invests in an employee, and then the other one offers, I don't know, more money, or there can be various factors that can affect why a person would want to change. And it's not all up to it's not about a company not willing to invest. They are. However, those sums that are invested are pretty high. So there also needs to be, as obviously companies are thinking quite a lot of times, return on your investment. So I think there isn't even, I think there's no question of the fact that companies are not investing. They are. They just already see problems with that, because there's quite a lot of lack of specialists in certain fields. So I think you missed the point of the whole aspect. So yeah, I think it's what Zane said as well. It's more on skills and more on the fact that there's very little labor reserve, and especially in high quality specialists. Mm-hmm. And mostly when you want to improve the standing of high quality specialists, we're not talking about investing small sums. It's quite a lot that goes into these people, and high quality people will always be headhunted. And it's not about a company treating their employees one way or another. It's more about the fact that we lack qualified labor force.
No, yeah, and I want to actually have the follow-up question with Rolands, because it is a scarcity question right now. So salaries are up by 15%. There's just physically not enough people, and I can say that Riga reached unemployment figure for Riga in this August was 4.5. Anders Palzel can confirm as an economist that below 5% is unhealthy. Economy is working full capacity. So basically there's no labor reserves in Riga. So my question to you, Rolands, is what is Riga doing to attract more labor, to attract more people from countryside, to upskill them, is there Work in Riga platform? How are you working with not only fixing the office space question, which has been done very successfully with Green Corridor and state changing legislation, but what are you as a Riga doing to attract more skilled labor to Riga?
Mm-hmm. So this is not directly my responsibility to attract more skilled labor to Riga, and if we talk about Riga, it's the wrong approach to talk about Riga, because we have to take into consideration Riga metropolitan area, because that's really where the economy happens. And it's not a secret that for the longest time people have been moving out to the outskirts of Riga and flowing still inside Riga for business and for work. So if we look at the whole picture, holistic view of the labor market, it's very healthy, and especially if you compare it to Vilnius, I mean, it's silly to say that the salaries are super high in Riga, because it's really not. The average salary in Riga is not only lower than in Tallinn and Vilnius, but also lower than Kaunas, Klaipėda, and Šiauliai. So why are you telling me that the average salary is getting very high and it's ridiculous? But
it has increased. That's economic
but it's
data,
increasing everywhere,
15%.
and there's lack of labor everywhere. So it's not a valid argument here. And if we look at the market of Vilnius that you talked about as well, especially GPS, please look at the numbers there, look at the salaries there, because it's cosmos. It's nothing comparable to Riga. And the market saturation in Vilnius and the market saturation in Riga is day and night, because they are purchasing and they are headhunting employees from one GBS to another. But in Riga, it's not really the case. There is still available workforce. It just happens that you can also get it for better price. But the minus here is what I agree to, is that there is a lack of trained employees. And it is largely up to the companies, and it is also something that has to be utilized. What Lāsma hasn't had a word yet, but there are 2 incentive programs in LIAA that helps companies to pay for employee upskilling, and this is what has to be utilized. And I agree that there is general lack of skills, and I agree that there is plenty of different ways of fixing it, especially by making the international digital tools available to the unemployed, and also to the ones who want to upskill themselves personally. Because it's very crucial to target that specific audience, because you cannot really target the audience who doesn't care about upskilling themselves. But what Lithuania did, and what Latvia also did now, they made pages such as Coursera available for the unemployed. So this is heavily helping to upskill the ones who want to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I will commend that. I don't agree that it's not part of Riga problem. Actually, your budget derives from salaries, so you're very interested in having as many people with high salaries in Riga as possible, A, and B, Latvia has the highest percentage of unqualified labor. So basically, if you say it's bullshit that there is a lack of employees because the salaries are still lower in Šiauliai, that's not because there's access to labor. That's because there are paying their higher skills in neighboring countries, unfortunately. And we have to fix this. And Lāsma, could you tell a bit more how is LIAA working? Yeah, how to fix it.
I will not fix it by myself, but if we speak about the skills and the labor, it's, as you know, it's a much larger question. And as you know very well, there are so many ministries and agencies involved in a process of education. And I think the main problem is even in the root of all the systems that 20 years ago, when with implementation of I think it was World Bank's recommendations, when in high schools there was division to lower the classes with science basis, and I think personally that was the hugest mistake, because I remember I was the first class or first grade when it started, so I needed by myself to choose in a 9th grade, do I want to learn mathematics, biology and chemistry, or I just want to learn just social science. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just terms of overall education per se. So that's, I think, a very big problem in the planning of next levels of education, or let's say projecting what kind of workforce we will have later on, and it will be a big problem. So, but we as an agency, we try to, of course, work with the existing situation and what we have. And that's why not maybe, but quite for sure, Global Business Services, Shared Service centers was kind of response to an existing situation in Latvia, is that we have quite a lot students, people with a social education, so they needed a job in some sense. That was one of the reasons why Global Business Services actually improved, developed, and are in the existing, let's say, developed situation as it is. I want a little bit contradict situation with Vilnius. It's situation with Vilnius is like that there is, I would say, that structure of global business service centers in Latvia or Riga basically is more healthier than in Vilnius. Because in Vilnius, there are, let's say, few very huge companies like Barclay and some others who are employing a large number of people. In Riga, there we have more companies working in global business services, and they are in a medium size, which is more healthier for attraction of new employees. And so there is not all people are working for some couple of companies, and there is not anymore. So, in that sense, I would say that Riga is quite thriving in terms of GBS. And also I need to note that GBS and IT is one of the priority sectors of this so-called smart industrialization, or the priority sectors where Latvia see new investments coming on. And also another comment, what I wanted to mention, in terms of language skills, we actually there is actually data that we are not so bad as Lithuania and Estonia. We are actually better than them in terms of because at least half of population speaks 3 languages, and 95% of population speaks 2 languages. So that's a little bit different situation in
but if
other
you
countries.
take off Russian.
This is a new development with Nordic languages, and this is global shared services which came to Latvia is actually improving because they work with Nordic countries, and they that's also internal internal training, upskilling of the existing workforce. That's one thing. But I think in language-wise we are quite okay. Well, but when we speak about digital skills, yes, that's a problem not only for Latvia. I think that's already a global problem, and that's why World Economic Forums and other, let's say, big research and big brain agencies or organizations are speaking about that. But the good news are that I think the government is thinking about that. Ministry of Environment and regional, they have a new guidelines for digitalization, and there is for 2021 to 2017, and digital skills or improving of digital skills is a big part of that, where a significant amount of resources are allocated for that. So that's, I wouldn't say the future is very pessimistic. There is initiatives and quite serious dedication of resources, as well as policy terms like guidelines and plans to improve the situation. Of course, I agree to Linda that we always need to strive for even better streamlining of all these processes.
Great, thank you. So let's open the floor to questions from hall. We have 2 already. Let's give the floor, ladies first, if we can, Ambassador, sorry, and then we'll go.
I'm sorry then, but I should have mentioned in my introduction that we have colleagues from Lithuania and Estonia, including my good colleague Atti, Ambassador of Estonia, and I don't know whether they want to comment in particular on your findings, and also what I should have pointed out, I mean, you're all friends and distinguished colleagues of myself and of the embassy, and that's why I didn't address you in my introduction. But there's one person actually I want to single out in this audience, and it's Latvia's ears and eyes and voice in Stockholm as from Monday next week. Ilse Ruse, the next ambassador of Latvia to Stockholm.
They'll have to work together.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's really, thank you, Karin, and it's great pleasure to start my duties on Monday in Stockholm. So I'm leaving on Saturday, and today I'm still Director of International Organizations and Sustainability. But I just want to say that thank you for this very deep, interesting discussion. I think many views. My view is the glass is half full. I'm the optimist one, and I have heard also the challenges. So I will do my best to investigate them, to target you individually, to talk to you, and to attract more investments to Latvia. I think this is the main news, that investments are coming, increasing, and continuing. And let's speak to other 470 companies that were not included in the survey. And greetings to Estonian ambassador and Lithuanian colleagues. As always, this is such an, enhancing competition between our countries.
And if I may, I have a question. Thank you, Zane. Lāsma, you alluded to the RRF, as it is called. I think you all know what we're talking about. You said money is coming Latvia's way. Quite a lot of money, actually, 1.8 billion euros. But and 37% of that is supposed to be aimed at sort of what do you call it? Green recovery, achieving climate objectives. And I just, could you expand a bit on that? How do you see that? Is that an opportunity or not for companies operating in Latvia?
It's definitely an opportunity. It's definitely opportunity for the companies operating in Latvia and for those who want to operate in Latvia. But we are, as a LIAA, we are a policy implementator, so we are kind of doers or just promoters of Latvia, and then in all the other fields we do. But Ministry of Economics are the ones who create the plans for and approve the plans for RRF, but I have a paper. That's why I took the printouts, and I can tell you that for RRF there are 4 main directions. So one is digital transition, which is 130, almost 140 million euros. Social and territorial cohesion, it's 123 millions. Productivity, 114 millions, and green transition is 282 million. So there is quite significant, and of course there are like programs under that, which is, as we understand, still under, let's say, construction. So there is no concrete main directions known, but concrete programs. So that's what I can tell you at the moment. But definitely, the short answer is yes, there's opportunities, especially because the main focus is on the smart range installation. Sorry. So Latvia has 5 priority investment sectors, because we want to, as a country, we want to develop manufacturing and service provision with more higher value-added products and services. So the main industries are, not the main, but the priority industries are, it's IT and global business services. It's smart energy, it's smart mobility, it's engineer systems and smart materials, it's bioeconomy, and it's also biopharmacy, biotechnology, and that field, where we have strong traditional sectors in, we have strong competence, but we just, we can always add even more new niche production or niche service provider. Did I answer?
I think yes. Thank you so much. Question? I think so, because they're recording. So, well, sorry.
I'll take a position here. My name is Jakob Lalander. I've been working here since 29th of July 1994. And it's, I didn't answer this survey because I consider myself a local nowadays. And I cannot entirely look at this with Swedish eyes, but I have my markets in Sweden. And I have some ideas why Latvia's rating fell a bit here. First, we look at the methodology of this survey. I'm not criticizing it because it's very good. You can compare to historic results and then monitor changes. But you're missing two things. I think in this room we have a little elephant walking around here, and we also have a big void, a vacuum, a black hole that we haven't mentioned. I'll start with the black hole because it's maybe the most dangerous. That is the ferry. I haven't seen such bad connections between Riga and Stockholm since Estonia sank, and one had to take various means of transport, let's say freight ferries from Tallinn and so forth. Why don't we have a ferry line between Riga and Stockholm? It's a big black hole in my world because I'm moving trucks and people back and forth and we're labor force between Sweden and Latvia. And also the prices of the few alternatives that are left are going up. I'm very happy to hear about Norwegian coming in with more people and maybe improving the infrastructure. So the infrastructure part of the survey could be more detailed or more could comment on the fact that maybe we have better roads in Latvia now. Maybe the infrastructure was a bit better, but there's a huge void without the ferry. The elephant walking around here is, we talk about business environment, but the business environment has changed. And my challenge today is to use a lot of my time to answer questions from my banks, my bank managers. And they are assuming the role of both business environment and service function to businesses. They have a role that was pushed upon them from authorities, and that is to become a half authority. So the Latvian authorities in general have improved, but the banks have taken over their role, not only in Latvia, in other countries also, but it's accentuated in Latvia because Latvians are very good workers. We all agreed on that recently, and they always try to be the best in the class and be favorites with the teachers. So the banks have over, in my opinion. These are the changes I see, and they're not entirely reflected in this survey. Although I understand the format of the survey should be related to historic service also. About labor force, why are we Latvians here popular as labor force? I can tell you, because my Swedish part remembers. Latvians, they are more willing than Swedes to work overtime. That's number one. Second, they are willing to take steps and re-qualify themselves and do extra efforts to work. We are leaning back on wealth in Sweden, and that slows our willingness to work. And entrepreneurs in Sweden, they realize that and locate some of their production in other parts. But this is a process. Latvia will come this way sometime in the future also. Thank you.
Is there, if I can, does anyone want to comment any of the three questions, ferry, AML, or like the last one probably was more like a comment?
No, I agree to everything.
Okay.
The funny part, the banks are mostly Swedish.
Yes, true, but then is there any change when it comes to state enforced requirements to banks? Briefly, very briefly, one sentence and then we...
I cannot solve the
Yes.
bank regulation system, but that's what Finance Association are saying to us, because that we are having the same problem when we speak with the new companies who cannot open the bank account. And then how we can speak about the new investments when the companies cannot even open the bank account. So we know about the problem in that terms. We know about our even the biggest exporters who export to so-called third countries, and then there is a new, how to say, tests, not tests, but Checks, new checks for every, how to say, movement, just because they are exporting to third country. So yes, we know unfortunately about this big elephant. When we have spoken with finance associations and the institutions, and the answer is usually, not usually, but that mainly is like that there is these new anti-money laundering regulations. And that's actually for stay. The issue, what they agree, is that the communication with the companies or the public is not so well. Why these standards are implemented and why there is so many checks in such a hard situation. So I would say that communication with the public should be improved.
Thank you. We have a follow-up comment from Bank, as I understand, and then we'll go to further questions.
Yeah, if I may, Carlis from SEB, or SE-banken, as you say in Sweden. And yeah, I'll try to comment a bit. I have been in a position for a couple of years responsible for AML in Baltics, so I have had a chance to compare it when it comes to all three Baltic countries and Sweden. And yeah, those of you that know me know that I have been fairly critical of Latvia during the last 2 decades when it comes to honesty, integrity of our institutions, our institutional strength, and all that. And I have been saying for 2 decades that this is matter of our national security, this is matter of our further development, and it is state's obligation to be on the side of all those investors that are clean and that are coming with all the right values, and not so much sideline itself with those that want to play by other rules. So I would say, yeah, the transition that Latvia has been making in terms of financial sector and banking has been particularly stark. It has been fairly rapid, and of course it comes like a cold shower. But I'm quite certain that other countries, and well, as we speak, also Lithuania and Estonia are doing the same thing and do not differ in any way from Latvia. It's also matter of time that other larger European countries would be playing by the same rules: Germany, France, Spain, etc., etc. And yeah, I would end again by saying that in Latvian case it was crucial. It was a matter of national security. It was a matter of that magnitude, no doubt about that. Latvia was, frankly speaking, also fairly close to potentially being grey-listed by Moneywall. I think that is something we underestimate, and now Malta is grey-listed, and you can sort of look at the other countries who have been grey-listed and can see that things are even worse there. And in a way, that's sorry to say, that's part of doing business here. If you end up in town that has a bit too many gangsters, sorry for being this straightforward, then if police officers come in, you also don't feel right. Even if you are squeaky clean and honest yourself, you also don't feel very comfortable. But you need to, in that dark moment, you need to understand that this is for the long-term security, for the long-term benefit of the town. And if you are a clean guy, yes, you might be sort of also put against the wall. Your pockets might be checked initially. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good. Don't take it personally. This is for the long-term benefit of respective city. And again, I'm tremendously proud of Latvia's achievements when it comes to cleaning up the system. The shock has been there. We will sort of hopefully recalibrate and have more what is called risk-based approach, and ask fewer questions to the ones that are honest citizens of a town. But again, in a big picture, this has been a price that we needed to pay, but I have no doubt that this has been price worth paying. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for comment. And we had one question there. Is it still relevant? Someone wants to... Okay, yes, can we pass the microphone
to a thing or two about it as well.
To Estonian colleagues. And then we're going to round up.
Thank you. Karin kindly offered the floor to me as well in order to make some comments that actually I was not planning myself, but actually with pleasure I can add also some points from my part. I don't dispute anyhow with the conclusions of the survey. I think it has been made very professionally, and And after all, the presenter happens to be Estonian national as well. So he can, if he wishes, he can also, in final comment, open some background as well. But just making some comparison very, very briefly between the Baltic countries. Of course, price level in some aspects, it plays a role. It is generally known that Estonia, especially in Tallinn, the price level is somewhat higher than in other Baltic capitals. Maybe not necessarily in high technology sector, that is a well-paid job everywhere. But simply what is on the one hand advantage, but maybe also in some aspects disadvantage for Estonia, that is the proximity of Finland and of Scandinavian business culture, its influence. That brings the prices to a higher level. And just reminding one very expert panel discussion at our recent ambassadors conference, where the question was asked by one colleague that according to some statistics, the Lithuanian GDP in BBB prices was already somewhat higher than in Estonia. How to explain that? And then it was responded by Ardo Hansson, our former president of the central bank and currently prime minister's economic policy advisor. And he brought out two aspects. On the one hand, the so considerably lower price level in Lithuania and also the bigger population number. Estonia is the smallest in terms of population. Lithuania is still 2.5 times bigger. Maybe Lithuanians one day will take over all the Baltic business. But if an Estonian company wants to expand, then they have to look immediately into other Baltic markets. In Latvia, it has been so far mostly the cheaper labor force, but not only. And that brings me to the IT business. It makes sense actually for Latvia and Estonia to combine the efforts between the IT communities and other highly developed sectors, because taken one by one, we are all small, but together we can really win some really important international tenders, and that is maybe our future as well. And very briefly, the question about the ferry connections. I am also missing the Riga-Stockholm line, and next week I'm going to meet the local manager of Tallink again. But I don't know so exactly yet about their plans, but of course, it is a business-based decision. And when the line was closed temporarily, that was also due to the factor in that time that Sweden had then chosen totally different option in fighting the pandemics. When Latvia and also Estonia were rather close, there was even no reasonable bus connection between Tallinn and Riga for some time. And it takes time until the market recovers and it makes sense economically to open the Riga-Stockholm line as well. Maybe the epidemiological indicators are already so that it would not so totally contradict the Latvian national politics in fighting pandemics. So look forward to that, but business is business. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think with that we'll finish. I think what is important is to stay with the main findings of the survey that really says that Swedish businesses have done well even during the COVID, that Swedish businesses are planning to expand in Latvia. And I also want to mark really the fact that we've had a major change in the management of both Latvian Investment Development Agency and Riga City Council and all respective roles. And we really see some major improvements. So thank you for the work you already done. And I think everything that has been planned is very appropriate, and we're very much looking forward to enjoy the fruits of it all. So thank you so much. So keep investing and expanding, so to say. Thank you.